Welcome to Westbury Analytics Radio, where ServiceNow performance analytics for senior executives comes alive. Experienced ServiceNow architects, performance management experts, and other executives in your field share insights for how to drive performance management using the power of ServiceNow performance analytics. Performance analytics is a game changer, but it requires a different way of thinking than how most people think about reporting and performance measurement. Our goal here is to help you develop that new way of thinking. I am your host, Pedro Soto. In this episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio, you will hear key insights from someone who has seen what works and what doesn't, from actually doing the work of setting and executing strategy around business planning and performance measurement.
Hello, everybody. This is Pedro Soto, welcoming back our listeners to another episode of Westbury Analytics Talk Radio. Our special guest today is Gordon Mitcheson-Smith, who brings well over a decade's worth of experience doing the work of business planning and performance measurement. I frequently talk to thought leaders advising and providing tools to people like Gordon, who actually do the work day in and day out, which is why I'm particularly excited to have him on our show today, so we can hear from someone who has seen what works and what doesn't from personal experience, from being in the front line. So Gordon, thanks for taking time to join us. Would you please tell our listeners a little bit about you and your journey through the world of performance management and measurement to get us started before we dive deep into our subject?
Certainly. Thank you very much for inviting me on, Pedro. I really appreciate the opportunity to share some of these stories, and
Sure.
and I hope your listeners will find it of benefit. So my story is one which is sort of based upon me saying yes to opportunities. I've had no defined career path, but what that's allowed me to do is have a good experience right across businesses in all types of different functions. And most of the time, that's been borne out by the fact there's been some kind of performance issue, isn't it, which we've needed to deal with. And I've been fortunate enough to get the opportunities to try my hand, make lots of mistakes, and also find out what things work and what things work on a consistent basis. Although, as we know, one size doesn't fit all, so you've got to be thoughtful about how you apply some of the things we'll be talking about today. But I've worked in a whole range of industries. I've worked for myself. I've worked for sort of SMEs. I've worked for global companies, and across a range of industries, private companies, sort of public organisations, as well as charities. So I've got this broad range of experience, which allows me to tackle challenges with lots of different lenses and lots of different perspectives, which often helps to see things in a slightly different way than other people. Although sometimes it's the challenge is to help other people shift their perspectives as well. So so
yes, it
at
is.
the moment,
That is definitely an interesting challenges to help others shift those perspectives.
That's it, and I think and I think for me, particularly with performance measurement, it's always felt a bit of a natural affinity to me. I've had a kind of natural affinity with it, partly because I wouldn't say I'm naturally talented at anything in particular. So I've always had to work hard, whether that's kind of sports, work-wise. I'm one of those people that unfortunately has to slog and put in the hours, and performance measurement has been that mechanism for creating a learning feedback loop. So I've been able to figure out what do I need to do more of that works and helps me get where I need to go, what doesn't work, or what could I be doing better or what can I do that I don't do very well that I can do better at, which also helps to propel me forward. So I think that's when I kind of got into the types of roles I've been in over the last few years, where performance measurement has been at the heart. It's that kind of attitude which I've been trying to sort of bring to the table, and I think that's one of the really important things when it comes to performance measurement, because one of the barriers is that people organisations often link it to reward and failure, and reward and punishment, and it becomes a binary: you're either successful or you fail, and that makes people nervous about engaging in it,
Right.
and it makes people kind of shy away from trying to really use performance measurement as a tool, which can allow which can allow performance management to improve your organization's performance. And I think that's what it comes down to. It's that tool to drive improving performance, as opposed to looking at it in a binary fashion of it's success or failure. Because even when things don't work, you can take that as a learning experience to make that, to make a better decision next time round. And I think it's that, having that kind of growth mindset, that think about what can we do next, which is going to make the situation better.
So
that's what performance measurement should be fueling.
Awesome. So let me recap. So historically, this whole process or practice of performance measurement has been very much imbued with this approach of reward and punishment, a binary thing, right? And probably, and not probably, I mean, as human beings, we tend to remember more the negative, right? The punishment part of it, and tend to shy away from it. So as a whole, the performance improvement and the performance measurement process is tainted with a negative experience in people's minds.
Absolutely.
But there's a better way to approach it.
Certainly, yeah. And this is it. And it's approaching performance measurement and management as a learning experience.
A learning experience.
And if you can create a culture around performance that has that learning environment, it suddenly becomes, it generates energy to make things better. It allows people to engage because they know it. We can't control everything. We can only control what we do ourselves and how we approach something. And and nobody comes to work to do a bad job.
Right.
So so creating that environment where people can get energized about challenging what they're doing and how they're doing it, and reaching stretching targets, and sort of getting a real sense of sort of pride out of doing so, helps this whole process of actually trying to sort of improve performance. And I think this is, and again, I'll keep coming back to, the point is to improve performance, not to measure stuff, not to say what happened last week, not because you can't change that. That's happened. It's been and gone. It's about what do we do next that will make the situation better, which will get us a better result. What do we learn from that experience? And it's getting your team or your organization with that mindset to push forward and start challenging the way things happen. That is the real benefit of that comes from a really good performance measurement system.
Right, and that's something that is, I mean, almost 100% exclusively the responsibility of leadership, isn't it? To set the tone for that to be the approach to measuring and improving.
Yes, and it is. I mean, that's, we know culture flows from the top, and people by nature will follow the behaviours they're shown, and I think again it does have to come down from the top. But even in business units or individual teams, people can make the choice to act in that way, even though it might jar slightly with the wider organisation. And I think this is, you know, and I've seen this, and I've done this in organisations where, you know, we've been able to move teams into being really high performance teams by creating a really strong team culture.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that some of the surrounding, you know, the prevailing attitude in the organisation was one which was a reward and punishment type approach.
Ah, okay, got it.
So, so again, it's, you know, I'm not saying that's easy, and it is difficult to sometimes to you know, sort of try to stand against the tide, but it is possible. And again, I think what then happens is that then people come and ask, you know, start to ask the question, how come, you know, how come your team has got such good morale, or how come your team are hitting their targets, or how, you know, and people want to know, and people want to learn, and then you can start putting those, you know, pushing those ideas out in the wider, you know, sort of across, you know, wider across the organisation, and that's when actually what you see is that people, sort of leaders and managers, realise that actually getting a team to work is hard work, and that's when you see people who are prepared to either put in the hard work, or feel that actually they're happy to keep things with the status quo they have. And again, that's their choice. You know, you know, and in those circumstances, you know, that's not for me to resolve or sort out.
Right.
You know, because we're all grown up and we can make our own decisions. But it's not the way that I operate.
Okay, so that's a important key point, right? The approach taken, the mindset behind the performance measurement and improvement program, taking it as a learning experience. What is another key principle of performance programs that are successful, that are impactful?
I think it's getting absolute clarity on what you're trying to achieve. I mean, Peter Drucker said that there was nothing quite so useless as doing something with great efficiency that should not be done at all. You know, it's, and I think this, and I think what's, you know, there's a couple of things. You know, clarity and the transparency of the performance goal or the result you're trying to achieve actually stems, you know, is at the very heart of this. I've seen so much effort wasted around performance, you know, performance measurements and performance frameworks, where the performance aspect, the result, isn't really dealt with until the end of the strategy and planning process. So, and this happens quite often with organisations which are, they kind of value busyness, or they're kind of captured in that kind of negative urgency. They've got to be doing something. You know, they rush into action and they decide what they're going to do. And then at the end of the process, people start asking the question, so how do we know if we're successful? How do we know if we've done this the right way? And then it's really difficult, because then you've got to try and retrofit things. You've got to try and understand what the original idea was at the beginning of what this particular program was going to do, and what it was trying to achieve. So you end up wasting lots of time, and also you end up with poor measures which don't really tell you anything and can't really drive performance, and they quite often tend to be, you know, milestone based or task based. We have done X, but that doesn't tell you whether that's actually moved you closer to the results that you've actually wanted to achieve. So, and as part of that, you've got to drive out words in any goal result you're aiming for, which have a degree of ambiguity to them. I'm a big fan of Stacey Barr's work in the pump process, and these are the words that she calls weasel words, which some of your listeners might have heard of. Yeah, so these are words like efficient, effective, best in class, capacity, quality, productivity, sustainability. They're all great words, and they all kind of, we see them in business jargon all the time, but in themselves, they don't mean anything, and you can't measure them. They have a different interpretation for everybody. So when you're trying to define a result, using those types of words and defining result just leaves them impossible to measure with any accuracy, and it's really difficult at the end of the day to say whether you've driven any improvements or not. So when we come back to what are we trying to achieve, you've got to have a result. It's got to be quantitative. You've got to be able to say this is this is what we're trying to achieve. It's got to be using unambiguous language. It's got to be transparent, and it's got to be well defined. And in doing that, we get, it will give us better clarity in terms of the goals we're trying to achieve. We'll have a clear result that the people who are doing the work will understand what it is and how they contribute to it. And we can base it on observable and sensory information, which is key to actually getting that definition correct. You've got to measure it in something you can measure and you can tangibly see, and you can see the impact of. So I'm putting all those together. That continues to add the clarity. And the last thing around clarity, I would say, is don't give yourselves too many goals to try and achieve. 2 to 3 goals, you're probably going to do them. Once you start adding 4 or more goals, you start getting diminishing returns. And if you're into sort of double figures worth of results you try to achieve, then
it's too much.
That's just a list, isn't it? It's just a list at the end of the day, wish list.
Yeah.
And your resources and your efforts are going to be too thinly spread, and you'll probably won't achieve any of them. So it's having a few very well defined, clear, unambiguous results that you can align your efforts behind in order to sort of drive that performance improvement.
Excellent. That's great. What are some things that you have discovered along your journey that really surprised you, in terms of how people react to these kinds of programs when they're put in place? What are just things that you just stood back when you realized what you were discovering? It's like, wow, this is really interesting. This is unexpected, and perhaps very revealing.
So I think at the end of the day, we can't achieve anything by ourselves, and you've got to work with the people who are going to be delivering the result for you when it comes to either the improvement program or and the performance measures. And I think when I was a younger man, I sometimes didn't appreciate that not everybody saw the world in the way that I do, and this idea of wanting to improve performance, wanting to sort of learn sort of from experiences and put in place measures so we knew whether we were doing well or not. I perhaps didn't deliver that in the best way to the people I was working with, and obviously we know with things like behavioural economics and ongoing research into the workplace that things like autonomy, mastery, trust, respect has a huge impact on individuals, and you can't. And I think this is the real insight for me is you can't manage a team. You manage individuals because we're all different, and performance management is a team sport. You've got to figure out who you need in the room. You've got to have the right people in the room in terms of where their mindset is at, the experience and knowledge, because you can't, as a leader, you can't do it by yourself. If you impose things on people, they won't buy into it. They'll find reasons not to engage. And at the end of the day, you're reliant on other people to actually do the work in most cases. So getting people on board who are who know what the work is um, and and getting them on board in terms of them understanding what you're trying to achieve and why. Getting people who actually kind of understand the process, so they can, so you can have that dialogue about how things could be improved. I'm a big fan of lean thinking as well, sort of those various deploying those kind of techniques to try and unpack a process to understand where you can make improvements and save time and save waste. And the other thing, which again is probably slightly left field at times, is you've got to have people involved who know the data, because again, an area where time can be wasted through the process is, you come up with a great idea of how you're going to measure a process or performance, and you spend a lot of time sort of with the people doing the work, figuring out what kind of things you're going to be doing and what those targets can be and how we're going to track them, only to find out that the system doesn't capture that data. And or the data that you think you're being presented with is not exactly what you thought it was. So getting those people who understand the data that exists and also what data can happen, because again, it's not a it doesn't have to be a one-shot effort. It's a what can we do now, what can we do next, and having a development program in the background to say, okay, this is what we can do at the moment given the data that we've got available. But if we develop our data capture, we can move into these other areas. But I've seen a lot of time wasted where targets are being created and then you sit down to say, well, where's the data? And so we said, well, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So how are we going to measure it?
It's quite common, actually. Yeah, it's uncanny how common that is.
That's it. So I think I think all these things around having this idea of sort of getting a team together to look at measures and getting specialists involved to look at these things holistically is the way to go, rather than imposing things or sort of relying on sort of just a couple of those specialisms, because otherwise you'll there'll be something that you miss and it will impact the acceptance of the program or the data that you can work with. And again, and as a leader or manager, I would always say you need to go and see the work. That kind of that lean idea of going to the place of work. As what's that phrase? Go see, ask why, show respect. And I think that's a great way for leaders to engage with their teams and think about the actual work that needs to be done, because so often we forget about what actually is involved in the work, and sometimes if you can overlook the actual the real sort of detail, if you don't actually take the time to go and sit with people and see what it actually means.
Yep.
So and the other thing is around communication and reporting. Again, reporting is so often I've seen reporting being backwards looking. This is what happened last month. It hasn't got a bias towards action, and again, it tends to be what you tend to see is people may consult at the start of the process and then report at the end of the process, and there's a yawning gap in the middle. Communication through these types of programs and through this type of activity needs to be regular. It needs to be two-way. As I started at the beginning, we're using performance measurement as a feedback loop to learn how things are working and whether they're working well, and what levers and dials we can move in order to make things better. So we've got to have that regular feedback. It's got to be two-way. and it's got to be continuous, because otherwise, obviously, other priorities come along, other pressures come along, people lose focus, people get complacent,
Sure.
and so keeping that momentum going and keeping that focus through having sort of clear, regular, transparent communication is a really helpful way of moving these programs forward and keeping them going.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And in that, and it's really important to celebrate the successes and the failures, and treat those failures as those learning experiences. So we don't want to brush them under the carpet. We don't want to say, oh, we don't talk about that one because it didn't work. We want to say, we tried this, it didn't work. Why not? What do we do next time? And again, I think we're quick to slap people on the back when a job goes well, but when it doesn't go quite so well, we either knock somebody down or we kind of ignore it. Which I think is I think it doesn't show respect to the individuals or the team's efforts. And I think and it doesn't and it doesn't demonstrate the behaviour that actually we want to learn from this. And it's and in a cultural way, it's not meant to be binary reward or punishment. It's meant to be, we've tried something, good on us, didn't quite work, never mind, what are we going to do next time? And having that positive growth mindset to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, what did we learn from it? Because the value of the failure is what is there to be learned that gives us insight into how we can improve. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? So the failure may be due to one of two things. It could be a process, a structure thing, or it could be an individual failure. Really, they screwed up. They failed to do what they needed to do. So,
and who hasn't screwed up?
Right? But in that case, again, it's the leadership. It's the leader of the team. It's on them to create a safe environment and to create a constructive environment to, as you say, either not gang up on the person or sweep it under the rug, but actually deal with it.
Yeah, and I think that's you're exactly right there. It is about dealing with it, and there can be poor performance which needs to be dealt with in terms of a more of a disciplinary discussion. And again, your team won't thank you if you don't deal with that.
Right.
With an individual. But again, it doesn't have to be. That can be done in a positive way. Because again, you don't know what's going on in that individual's life, what's going on. You don't necessarily know about all the interactions in the team. So again, my ethos is all about trying to create an environment for the team that allows them to do their best work.
Yep. That's awesome.
And sometimes that's having a tough discussion. Sometimes that's putting your arm around somebody's shoulder and saying, it's all right, let's keep going. Sometimes it's being the cheerleader and going rah rah rah. And that's where managing the individuals is important rather than managing the team, because the team is it's an amorphous whole, isn't it? You can't.
It's abstract.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a whole range of different people, different ages, different motivations, different skill sets, and it's getting that blend together and getting them working, together, which is where you sort of reap the benefits. And again, it's I think that's really important for any effort as you go forward, is thinking about how you get the maximum out of the team, not the one or two individuals. So again, it's as we know, star performance can be quite destructive to a team, and recruitment in that regard and getting that team right is really vital. And again, it's bringing the right people together in the right way, providing that safe environment, providing the support, the encouragement, the push and motivation that allows us to people to get the best work. And I always think, sometimes I did a workshop once with a call center team, and trying to get to what they call centers obviously traditionally have a high turnover of staff, and it's a difficult environment to work in. And they were talking about they wanted their staff to be happy, so they did the best work. But to my perspective, it's the other way around. People, when people succeed, when people do well, when people feel their work is valued and they can make a contribution, they're happy at work. There's a whole range of reasons why somebody might turn up at the door and be miserable today. They might be stuck in traffic. They might have had a row with their spouse. Their kids might have got a terrible result in a test, and they think the world is ending. The whole range of reasons why people might not be happy when they come to work. But at work, if they're in a safe environment, if they're producing good work, if they feel valued and respected, and they feel they can make a contribution, they can be happy at work and still have an off day.
Yep.
So,
I found really powerful your insight that you don't manage a team, you manage the individuals. That is so true. That is so true. Gordon, tell us in closing, and first of all, thanks so much for making time to join us and chat with us today and sharing some just really nuggets of experience based on direct contact with this world. Would you share with the listeners a couple of great resources you found along your journey that have helped you a lot? So you mentioned Pump. Can you just talk a little bit more about that and another resource that would be helpful?
Okay, so Stacey Barr is the creator of Pump, and it's a formalized process for creating really great, powerful performance measures. It's a process that I'm certified in and been through the training with Stacey's team, and it provides that mechanism to identify, define, and manage performance measures that actually drive performance improvement rather than just report on performance. She's got lots of resources online, and I believe she's got a blog which I think I would recommend people to check out called Measure Up. Another resource I think which is quite helpful for a framework to put those performance measures in is the OKR framework. So this is that's objective and key results. It started with Andy Grove at Intel. And it's used by companies such as Google, and it's a kind of the favoured framework with tech companies, and that uses that's using that quarterly objectives and key results in order to drive performance improvements. There's a great book on it called Measure What Matters by John Doerr, and that again, I'd recommend that as a really great resource on that particular framework. And the two, Pump and OKRs actually work together really well. And you can get Stacey's World will give you really good measures, and the OKR framework will give you that basis of laying things out on a quarterly basis to build momentum and a view mechanism for doing that. So they work together quite, there's quite a lot of synergy between the two. But I'm a bit of an inveterate reader, and I do consume an awful lot of resources. So I'm always, if anybody has any questions, they can always contact me via LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help out where I can.
Okay, excellent. Gordon, thank you so much. It's been a great learning time. And appreciate you sharing those couple of resources and how they can actually fit in together. And hopefully we'll have another opportunity down the road to invite you back on the show.
That'd be wonderful. Thanks ever so much for your time, Pedro.
Thank you, Gordon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We see a time when all business leaders using ServiceNow Performance Analytics will easily know how to leverage its power to help them reach their business goals. Performance Analytics offers you a way to do that. To discover how you can get there faster, send us an email to info@westburyanalytics.com.